12 gifts that look like blessings but are destroying your faith. Do not ignore this. The day Ananias and Sapphira carried their offering to the apostles, nobody in that room suspected what they were actually bringing. It looked like generosity. It arrived with the language of devotion. And it cost them everything. Not because the gift itself was evil, but because what was hidden inside it had never been brought before God. Acts chapter 5 does not record their story as a warning about money. It records it as a warning about what we allow into the places that are supposed to be consecrated to God. Not every gift that reaches your hands is what it appears to be. Some carry covenants. Some carry redefinitions of who you are. Some carry the quiet, patient work of an enemy who has studied your generosity, your loneliness, your hunger for recognition, and decided to use every one of them against you. The 12 gifts in this video are not abstract dangers. They are the specific things most believers have already accepted and never once questioned. And the last one on the list is the most dangerous of all, because it does not arrive from outside you. Type "God guards my discernment" in the comments right now, because discernment is not a natural instinct. It is a gift from God that must be claimed. Say it again. God guards my discernment. Like this video, subscribe, and stay until the very end, because the final gift on this list is the one you will be most reluctant to release. And that reluctance is exactly what makes it worth examining. Let us start with the first one, and it is already inside your home. Gift 1. The occult object in your home is a covenant you never signed. Most people who carry something dangerous into their home never knew it was dangerous. That is the entire design of the problem. The object did not announce itself. It arrived as a gift, a keepsake, a souvenir from someone's travels, a decorative piece that looked harmless sitting on a shelf. And because nothing visible happened the day it crossed the threshold, the question of what it carried never got asked. God addressed this with a directness that leaves no room for interpretation. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 25 and 26 commands that the carved images connected to the worship of other gods be destroyed completely, and then adds a warning that most readers move past too quickly. Do not bring a detestable thing into your house, or you, like it, will be set apart for destruction. God was not describing a preference. He was describing a spiritual mechanism. The object does not sit there neutrally. It represents an allegiance. It carries the covenant of whatever system produced it. And a home that contains it has, without anyone signing anything, entered into a relationship with something God already opposed. The believers in Ephesus understood this the moment the gospel reached them. Acts chapter 19, verse 19, records that those who had practiced magic arts gathered their scrolls and burned them publicly. The value of what they destroyed was 50,000 pieces of silver. They did not argue that the materials were too old to matter. They did not keep them behind glass as a cultural record. They burned them because they understood that a covenant does not lose its claim simply because you stopped believing in it. What sits in your home tonight is either under your covenant with God or outside it. There is no third category. If you have not typed "God guards my discernment" yet, do it right now. Discernment is not instinct. It is a gift from God that must be actively claimed. Say it again. God guards my discernment. Stay until the very end of this video, because the final gift on this list is the one sitting closest to home, and it is the one most believers never find the courage to name. The next gift does not arrive from a stranger. It arrives from someone who loved you, and that is exactly what makes it harder to let go of. Gift 2. The inheritance sitting in your house may not belong to your covenant. There is a box somewhere in many believers' homes. It came from a grandparent, a parent, an aunt who passed years ago. Inside it are objects that nobody has examined closely in decades. They stay because throwing them away feels disrespectful. They stay because the person who gave them is gone now, and the object is one of the last things that remains. They stay because nobody ever gave a name to what they might be carrying. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17 does not soften the instruction to accommodate family sentiment. "Come out from among them, and be separate," says the Lord. "Do not touch what is unclean." That word unclean does not refer only to objects acquired by personal choice. It covers everything that enters the household, regardless of how it arrived or who brought it. The covenant you stand in today is not inherited from your earthly family. It was purchased at the cross. And what you house reflects which covenant currently has jurisdiction over your home. Gideon understood what God required before a new season could begin. In Judges chapter 6, verse 25, the first instruction God gave him was not about the battle ahead. It was about the altar of Baal standing on his own father's land. "Tear it down," God said. Before Gideon could move into what God was calling him toward, he had to dismantle what his family had built in the wrong direction. The honor he owed his father did not extend to preserving his father's spiritual errors. You can grieve someone and still release what they left behind. You can love your family's memory without maintaining their confusion as a permanent fixture in your home. The next gift carries no family history and no sentimental weight. It arrives quietly, in a moment of decision, disguised as good instinct. And the danger is that it feels like common sense to ignore it. Gift 3. The uneasy spirit inside you is not anxiety. It is a warning. The most overlooked gift God gives a believer is the one nobody wants to slow down long enough to receive. Not a vision, not a dream, just a quiet, persistent unease that arrives the moment a decision is placed in front of you. No visible red flag, no clear evidence that anything is wrong. Only a heaviness that does not lift, a stillness inside that says wait, and a social pressure outside that says you are being unreasonable. Colossians chapter 3, verse 15 does not describe peace as a feeling to be chased. It describes it as a ruler. Let the peace of God rule in your hearts. The word Paul chose there carries the image of an umpire in a contest, the one with the authority to call the play dead. When peace withdraws from a decision you are about to make, that withdrawal is not emotional weakness. It is a ruling. And overriding a ruling from the Spirit of God because the moment felt awkward is not courtesy. It is disobedience dressed as social grace. Joshua learned what it costs to move without asking. In Joshua chapter 9, verse 14, the men of Israel examined the Gibeonites' provisions, assessed the situation with their own judgment, and made a covenant of peace with people God had never authorized them to align with. The text delivers the indictment in 6 words. They did not inquire of the Lord. The deception was sophisticated, yes, but it only succeeded because capable, experienced leaders trusted their own read of the situation over the internal check God had placed within them. The unease you silenced last time was not nervousness. It was instruction. Drop your first name and your city or country in the comments below. Whether you are watching from Dallas, from South Africa, or anywhere else across this world, let us know you are here. You are not alone in taking these warnings seriously. Stay until the end, because what is still ahead may be the gift you have been carrying the longest without ever questioning it. And if the warning inside you can be ignored, the next gift counts on exactly that. It arrives from someone who has studied how generous you are and decided to use it. Gift 4. The money that came easy may be costing you everything that matters. You did not steal it. You did not ask for it to come from where it came. Someone placed it in your hands, or offered you access to it, and the amount was real enough that walking away felt foolish. Maybe it arrived as a business arrangement that did not ask too many questions. Maybe it came through a family member whose methods you already had doubts about. Maybe you simply chose not to look closely at the source, because the need in front of you was genuine and the money solved it. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 27, does not make an exception for good intentions. The greedy bring ruin to their households, but the one who hates bribes will live. The word translated as bribes there covers the full range of unjust gain, anything received that was not clean in its origin. And the consequence described is not abstract. It lands on the household, on the children, on the future that the money was supposed to build. Achan did not take the Babylonian garment and the gold to harm anyone. Joshua chapter 7, verse 21 records simply that he saw them, coveted them, and took them. That was the entire sequence. He saw something valuable that God had forbidden, and he decided the need he felt justified the reach. What followed was not a private consequence. 36 men died in battle. An entire nation suffered defeat, and when the source of the contamination, he was finally uncovered, it was buried in one man's tent, silent and invisible, costing everyone around him what he had decided to keep for himself. The provision God sends never requires you to look the other way to receive it. What comes next does not cost you money. It costs you something quieter. And by the time you notice what is gone, it has already been draining for years. Gift 5. The object that keeps you grieving is a prison God already unlocked. Walk through enough believers' homes and you will find it. Not on display, usually. Tucked into a drawer, pushed to the back of a closet, sitting in a box that has not been opened in years, but has never been thrown away. A piece of jewelry from a relationship that broke something in you. A photograph from a season of shame. A gift from someone who used their generosity as a method of control. The object itself is harmless. But every time it surfaces, something in you goes back to a place you thought you had left. Philippians chapter 3, verse 13, is Paul writing from inside a Roman prison, which makes the instruction more striking, not less. Forgetting what is behind and reaching forward to what is ahead, he was not describing the absence of memory. He was describing a deliberate refusal to let the past set the terms for the present. Forgetting, in Paul's language, is an active posture. It requires a decision. And sometimes, that decision has a physical dimension that most believers never connect to their emotional and spiritual stagnation. Isaiah chapter 43, verses 18 and 19, records God saying something that should stop every person clutching yesterday's wreckage. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. The new thing God is doing does not compete with what you are holding on to. It waits. It waits until you put down the old enough to reach for what He has already prepared. The prison was unlocked a long time ago. The only question is why you are still standing inside it. Some of what you are holding is not a memory. It is a message someone sent you about who you are. And the next gift is how that message keeps getting delivered. Gift 6. The pity being offered to you is redefining who you are. Nobody warned you about this one. The dangerous gifts on the previous list came wrapped in darkness or tied to obvious compromise. This one comes wrapped in concern. It arrives with a soft voice, a gentle hand on the shoulder, and a face full of genuine care. And because the person offering it truly means well, You never think to examine what it is quietly building inside you with every delivery. Proverbs chapter 19, verse 17, says that whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord. Genuine generosity given to genuine need is holy, but there is a version of giving that is not about the recipient at all. It is about the giver's need to see someone as helpless. It is about the comfort of having someone who needs you. And when that kind of giving finds a person who is already wounded, already uncertain, already asking whether they still have something left to offer, it does not build them. It confirms their smallest version of themselves. It says, without ever using the words, "You cannot do this without me." Jesus walked into exactly that dynamic at the pool of Bethesda. A man had been lying in the same place for 38 years. People had been working around him, accommodating his position, accepting his presence at the edge of the water as a permanent fixture. And in John chapter 5, verse 6, Jesus did not reach down and carry him to the pool. He asked a question that cut straight through 38 years of received helplessness. Do you want to be healed? Not can you be healed. Do you want it? Because Jesus saw what the long accommodation had slowly produced. A man whose identity had reorganized itself around his condition. Pity accepted as a permanent arrangement does not keep you comfortable. It keeps you small. And if pity works by making you believe you need someone, the next gift works by making you believe you deserve someone's complete admiration. And that feeling is exactly what it is counting on. Gift 7. The flattery offered to you is a net laid beneath your feet. Flattery does not feel like a weapon. That is the entire point. Every other gift examined in this video carried some recognizable weight. Some moment where a careful person might pause and ask a question. Flattery removes that pause entirely. It replaces it with a warmth so specific and so welcome that most people never stop to examine where it is coming from or what it is being used to accomplish. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 5, names the mechanism without softening it. A man who flatters his neighbor spreads a net for his feet. The net is not visible. That is the design. The flattery is the distraction that keeps your eyes warm and your attention occupied, while the ground beneath you is being prepared to give way. Absalom understood this before he ever moved against his father David. 2 Samuel chapter 15, verses 2 through 6, records how he positioned himself at the city gate, intercepted every person coming to the king with a grievance, and told each one that their case was right and good, and that if only he were judge, justice would be done. He never forced a single person to follow him. He simply made each one feel uniquely understood and uniquely valued. Until their loyalty transferred without anyone noticing it, it moved. The text delivers the verdict plainly. Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel, not with truth, with the precise application of words each person most needed to hear. The person in your life who only ever tells you what you want to hear is not your greatest supporter. They are building something. Every word of affirmation is an investment toward the moment they need something from you that a clearer mind would never agree to give. Flattery builds access. What the next gift builds is something harder to name and far more difficult to walk away from. Gift 8. The relationship offering you everything may be demanding your calling. It does not feel like a demand. That is what makes this one so difficult to name while you are still inside it. The relationship feels like shelter. It feels like the first person in a long time who truly sees you, who stays, who asks about your life and actually listens to the answer. And because the warmth is genuine and the companionship is real, the slow pressure that arrives alongside it never announces itself as pressure. It announces itself as reasonableness, as balance, as the gentle suggestion that perhaps you have been a little too consumed by your calling lately. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 15, establishes a principle that extends beyond marriage into every significant relationship a believer carries. God has called us to peace, not to a relationship that requires the constant sacrifice of what God placed inside you in order to keep someone else comfortable. Peace in that verse is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of freedom, the freedom to remain who God made you, without having to negotiate that identity down to a size someone else can tolerate. Samson was not destroyed by a single moment of weakness. Judges chapter 16, verses 16 and 17, record a process. Delilah pressed him daily with her words, and urged him, until his soul was vexed to death. Daily. The word used there describes a grinding, a wearing away of something solid by the continuous application of pressure. Samson did not hand her his secret because he was foolish. He handed it to her because she had made the cost of withholding it feel greater than the cost of surrender. That is the mechanism, not force, exhaustion. A relationship that requires you to become smaller to sustain it is not offering you love. It is collecting what was never put up for sale. The next gift does not wear the face of a person. It wears the face of an opportunity, and it will ask for something far more specific than your calling. Gift 9. The bribe that looks like a blessing will ask for your soul at the end. The enemy never leads with the price. That is his oldest and most consistent strategy. He leads with the offer. He shows you the thing you have been quietly wanting for a long time. The thing you have prayed for and worked toward and sometimes wondered whether God had forgotten about. He places it in front of you at exactly the moment your patience has worn thin and your faith is tired. And only after your hands have reached for it does the condition attached to it become visible. Exodus chapter 23, verse 8, identifies this mechanism with a precision that should stop every believer before they reach. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds those who see clearly and twists the words of the righteous. The blinding happens first, before the twisting, before the compromise becomes visible. The moment you accept what was offered with a hidden condition attached, your ability to see clearly what you have entered into is already compromised. When Satan took Jesus to a high mountain in Matthew chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory, the offer was not obviously evil. The kingdoms were real. The glory was genuine, and the authority to give them was, in a distorted sense, within Satan's claim. All this I will give you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. Jesus did not negotiate the terms. He did not ask for a modified arrangement. He refused the entire transaction because he understood that no offer requiring the surrender of allegiance to God carries a price tag low enough to make the exchange worthwhile. The bribe on your table right now is not asking for your worship. It is only asking for one small compromise. That is always how it starts. If you have made it this far, you are not the average believer. You are someone who has already paid a price for your faith, not just attended it. The fact that you are still here, sitting with truths that are uncomfortable to examine, tells me you are someone who has chosen the hard thing before. You have stayed when leaving was easier. You have trusted God in seasons when the evidence for trusting Him was thin. That is not a small thing. That is a proven faith, and it is exactly the kind of faith these truths were built for. Do not stop here, because the final gift on this list is not something anyone gave you. It has been growing inside you quietly for years, and what Scripture says about it will change the way you see everything you thought was keeping you safe. Gift 10. The title being offered to you may cost you the identity God gave you. A title feels like recognition. After years of faithful, quiet, unrewarded service, someone finally sees what you have been doing and puts a name on it. A position, a platform, a seat at a table you were never invited to before. And because the recognition is real, and the hunger for it was real, the question of what the title will eventually require from you never gets asked in the warmth of that first moment. Galatians chapter 1, verse 10 places the question directly. Am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Paul asks it not as a rhetorical flourish, but as a diagnostic. Because a life organized around human approval does not collapse suddenly. It drifts. One accommodation at a time. One silence where a word should have been spoken. One softened conviction to protect a relationship with someone whose opinion has become load-bearing in ways it was never supposed to be. Saul is the portrait Scripture returns to most clearly when it wants to show what a life built on human recognition finally produces. In 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 30, after God had already removed the kingdom from him, after Samuel had delivered the verdict, and the consequence was irrevocable, Saul's first response was not repentance. It was reputation management. "Honor me before the elders of my people," he said. The kingdom was gone. What remained was the appearance of the kingdom. And he chose the appearance because by that point the approval of the people had become the only identity he had left. God's voice had been quietly displaced across years of small decisions, each one chosen to protect a standing that was never meant to be the foundation. The day the title is taken is the day you discover what you actually built your identity on. And what the next gift does is subtler still. It does not offer you a position. It offers you wisdom. And that is precisely why most believers never question it. Gift 11. The advice you keep receiving is slowly replacing God's voice. There is a difference between counsel that sharpens you and counsel that redirects you. Both arrive in the same form: a trusted voice, a reasonable argument, a perspective from someone who knows your situation and genuinely wants good things for you. The difference is not in the delivery, it is in the destination. One points you back toward what God already said. The other, slowly and without announcing the shift, points you somewhere else entirely. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15, identifies the vulnerability plainly. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. That verse is quoted often as a reason to seek counsel. It is quoted far less often as a reason to examine whose counsel you have been absorbing, and what it has been building inside you across months and years of consistent exposure. Rehoboam did not set out to destroy his kingdom. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 8 records that he rejected the advice of the older men who had served his father and turned instead to the young men he had grown up with, the voices most familiar to him, the ones most likely to tell him what his instincts already wanted to hear. He did not lack counsel. He had an abundance of it. What he lacked was the discernment to understand that the volume and familiarity of a voice are not the same as its authority. The voices he chose confirmed his preferences, and the kingdom split within a generation. The people closest to you are not always the ones most aligned with what God is building in you. Sometimes the most loving voice in the room is the one most gently pulling you off course. You can listen to many voices. Only one is permitted to have the final word. The last gift on this list will not be found on any shelf or offered by any person. It has been building inside you quietly for years, and it may be the most difficult thing on this entire list to release. Gift 12. The comfort you will not release is the thing keeping you from more. Comfort is not a sin. That needs to be said first, because what follows is not an argument against rest or stability, or the quiet seasons God sometimes builds into a faithful life. The danger is not comfort itself. The danger is comfort that has stopped being a season and become a settlement. Comfort that you have arranged your entire life around protecting. Comfort that has quietly become the standard against which every prompting of God gets measured and found too costly to pursue. Revelation chapter 3, verse 17 describes a church that had arrived at exactly that condition. You say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing. The assessment sounded like gratitude. It was actually a diagnosis. The church at Laodicea was not hostile to God. It was satisfied without Him. And satisfaction without God is not a peaceful place. It is a dangerous one, because it produces no hunger, no reaching, no willingness to release what is comfortable in order to receive what is prepared. Jesus looked at the rich young ruler in Mark chapter 10, verses 21 and 22 with love. That detail is in the text. This was not a cold transaction. Christ saw something in this man worth calling forward, something worth the full invitation. One thing you lack, He said. Go, sell what you have, give to the poor, and come follow me. The man had kept every commandment. His record was spotless. And he walked away grieving because the one thing Jesus asked for was the one thing he had organized his entire life to protect. He left with everything he came with, and lost everything he never had the courage to reach for. The question is not whether you have been faithful. The question is whether you have been willing. There will come a moment when every gift you ever accepted passes. Before the one who saw where each of them came from, and what each of them cost you. Not a moment of argument, a moment of complete clarity. And in that moment, the only question that will matter is not how generous you were. It is whether you were discerning with what you allowed in. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21, gives you the standard that moment will be measured against. Test all things. Hold fast what is good. That is not a call to suspicion. It is a call to stewardship. Every door of your life, your home, your hands, your heart, is yours to guard in the name of the God who gave it to you. 12 gifts, 12 doors, one question left standing. Subscribe to Bible Wisdom Spirit and watch the videos waiting for you next. This channel exists to put the biblical truth in your hands that most pulpits are no longer providing before the moment arrives when you need it most.